The 13th century knew them as the men out of hell, a horde that swept from the Asian steppe as far as Eastern Europe. Ghengis Khan and his heirs founded the largest land empire of all time. Their brutality was a byword. But the Mongol princes were also astute rulers. They guaranteed the trade routes between East and West for almost 200 years. In 1220, Ghengis Khan founded a city on the steppe, Karakorum, the capital of his empire. Today, archaeologists are bringing to light what the sand has concealed for centuries. Their finds and other historical sources are providing a first glimpse of the lost city. And they're trying to solve a mystery. What made nomads found a walled city? Dawn in Mongolia. Time for the nomads to begin their daily routine. For centuries, it has barely changed. Cattle raising is still the basis of their daily needs. The grazing land belongs to everyone. Fences are unnecessary. The cultivation of fields is unknown. The animals provide food and clothing and the materials for shelter and heating. 500 kilometers west of the modern capital, Ulaanbaatar, in the foothills of the Hungai Mountains, Mrs. Oidov lives with her family. From milk she makes urum, cream, while her husband, Heydaf, and son, Adiyadoch, saw firewood. With no refrigerator and no electricity, it's difficult to store food. If the Oidovs produce more than they need, they barter it, perhaps for the flour they want to make bursok. This fried pastry is the favorite dish of Ocha, the youngest member of the family. Today, around 1 million people live as nomads on the steppes, in an area 5 times the size of Germany. For them, a life spent in harmony with nature is no romantic notion of freedom, no escapist dream. Their very livelihood comes from nature. In an era of globalization, their world seems untouched. And Mongolia is indeed unique. It is the only country of nomads in the world.
Монгол식 түүхтэй орон гэж ер нь хаа байна вэ гэж л хэлмээр байна тийм ээ. Монгол гэдэг чинь бараг дэлхийг эзэлсэн шахуу тийм айхтар түүхтэй одоо Чингисийн одон гэсэн талаас нь тийм. Бид нар чинь Чингисийн үр сад яваа шүү гэсэн талаас нь би монголоор бахархаж явдаг да. Монгол хүн болсон да.
The Mongols first appeared on the world stage about 800 years ago. They quickly subjugated the steppe dwellers of Central Asia, but they also sent more and more raiding parties against the great empire to the south, China. There, too, they triumphed. Not even the Great Wall could withstand the onslaught of the enormous host of riders. But in 1219, the Mongols suddenly changed direction. They turned their path of conquest towards the west. Fear and terror paved the way for the conqueror. That is why I command you, spread terror. So said Ghengis Khan. His men unstoppable, leaving a trail of destruction behind them, conquering much of the Orient and devastating Russia. Finally, they stood at the gates of Europe. People had heard reports of the Mongols destroying whole cities in Russia. They sounded too awful to believe.
In the cities, they slew many with the sword, even the women and children. Not a single person was left alive. All this is retribution for our sins.
Europeans called this warrior race the Tartars, the men from hell. But they knew nothing about them. They believed that the lands beyond the Urals were inhabited by creatures out of fables. Ignorance spawned myths and legends. This 13th century chronicle depicts the Mongols as a race of cannibals, a distorted picture based on fear and loathing. One characteristic of this nation of nomads is that their history has always been written by someone else, namely by their enemies. The Guimet Museum in Paris has a copy of a work by the Chinese historian Sima Qian. It was written more than 1,000 years before the birth of Ghengis Khan.
Sima Qian a vécu à la fin du IIe siècle, au 1er siècle avant notre ère. Il est l'auteur d'un écrit prestigieux, s'appelle Sheti, les mémoires historiques. Et cet écrivain est le premier écrivain chinois à avoir développé un chapitre, qui est le chapitre 110, sur ces Mongols, qu'on appelle en chinois les Xiongnu. Littéralement, c'est un mot étrange, ça veut dire barbares, hurleurs.
Gol Mod, the valley of the Mod River, runs through the heart of present-day Mongolia. This was the home of the Xiongnu. Several years ago, on the edge of the valley, archaeologists found a burial site. Did Suma's chronicle correspond to reality? Jean-Paul Desroches and his team of French and Mongolian archaeologists are looking for answers in the tombs. The archaeologists were taken back by the size and complexity of this subterranean burial chamber. The slab covering the coffin was 16 meters below the surface. They began to wonder, was this really a culture of primitive nomads? The first objects they found in the tomb suggested that it was the grave of a powerful ruler. A bronze wheel hub. The bones of 15 sacrificed horses and countless Chinese clay vessels. Jean-Paul Desroches is convinced that these seemingly primitive burial mounds are the work of a highly developed culture.
Il y a, je pense, sans doute 3 ou 5 000 tonnes de pierre à l'intérieur, qui a nécessité sans doute plus d'1 millier d'ouvriers qui vont travailler pendant sans doute 1 mois pour réaliser cette œuvre, simplement l'architecture. Et si nous imaginons l'architecture souterraine, c'est une sorte de pyramide comme en Égypte qui a été nécessaire pour le creusement pour atteindre 16 mètres de profondeur. Et donc nous sommes face à l'une des grandes cultures. Et ici, le berceau qui va être d'une certaine manière le point de départ de cet immense empire qui ira de Pékin à Vienne en Autriche.
The only Mongolian source from the time of the Mongols' rise to power is a work called The Secret History of the Mongols. Half chronicle, half epic, it was commissioned by Ghengis Khan's son and successor, Ogorday, sometime before 1240. It went missing for centuries until, in 1866, parts of it were found in a Chinese library. The title Secret History indicates that only the Khan's family were allowed to see it. The original, written in vertical Mongolian script, has never been found. This reproduction gives an idea of what it may have looked like.